Here we are. Welcome back. So this lesson is double angle and half angle formula. So we have two sets of formulas, one on the left, one on the right. So for double angle, the theta is an angle measurement. So this one is an angle measurement. So I type it up for you, so we don't need to write it out in email. We don't need to write it out in this video. So we have sine, cosine, tangent. So one thing that you have to pay attention to is that cosine 2 theta has three formulas. All right, has three formulas. You will be using them most of the time when you do proving identities. Which one we have to use? Are they all the same? Yes, they are all the same. So which one you have to use? So usually for the cosine 2 theta, we have to use cosine square theta minus sine square theta. But depending on the problem, sometimes we can use 1 minus 2 sine square. Sometimes we use the 2 cosine square minus 1. And then the tangent 2 theta, you have to use that in this section. But when you take calculus in the future, you won't be using the tangent 2 theta very often. And then on the other side, we have half angle formula. So this theta is also an angle measurement. So we call this half angle because we take the angle and then divide it by half. Now, for the half angle formula, one thing that you have to pay attention to is when we use the half angle formula, we use the one that has a square root in it. But how come there is a plus or minus? There is a plus or minus in the sine, cosine, tangent, half angle is because there is a square in there. So when you take the square, or actually it's not just a square, when the degree is even and you take a radical on both sides, you have to use plus or minus. Now, that leads you to a very good question. Plus or minus, which one should I use? Should I use plus or minus or both? This depends on the problem. So sine half angle equals to the plus or minus the square root thing. The plus or minus depends on the problem. I will explain that when we do examples later. So let's start with the first example. So before we start, you know our rules. You don't just take the formulas from your videos. You have to handwrite this on your paper or on your notebook. So because we are not going to go back to these formulas, I assume that you will pause the video right now, take out a pen or pencil, write this down on your paper. All right. So let's read the first problem. So find the exact value of a trig function. So use the givens. So in number 1, 2, and 3, I gave you some given conditions. I want you to answer those 4 subproblems. All right. So for number 1, let's do number 1. So number 1, we have a sine of theta equals to 3 over 5, and then I see that 0 less than theta less than pi over 2. So since theta is between 0 and pi over 2, go back to your unit circle. What quadrant is that? That is quadrant 1, right? So in quadrant 1, both x and y are positive. We need this, okay? And then we are doing a half angle, right? Do you see that we have sine half theta and then cosine half theta? So we have to take care the half angle. So since we have theta between 0 and pi over 2, then half of theta, so that means in the compound inequality, you divide each side by 2, 0 divided by 2, and then a pi over 2 divided by 2, what do you get? You have 0, half theta, and then pi over 4. So between 0 and pi over 4, this 0 and this pi over 4, so 0 degree and 45 degree, the half theta is in quadrant 1, right, where x and y are both positive. Okay, so now we only have a sine. So if you go back to the formula, we know that having a sine is not enough. We need a sine, cosine, we have a tangent, but in this problem, I didn't ask for tangent 2 theta or tangent half theta. So we don't really need a tangent. So we have sine, we need to figure out a cosine. So using the sine theta equals to 3 over 5, in quadrant 1, we have to use the right angle trigonometry. So we draw a rectangle in quadrant 1, and then this is theta. So what do we have right here? We have sine, or in case you don't remember the right triangle trigonometry, we have SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA is right angle trigonometry. So sine, how do we use the SOH? That is opposite divided by hypotenuse. So opposite is 3, hypotenuse is 5. So opposite is 3, hypotenuse is 5. So this is my y value. This is my radius, because if you draw a circle, the radius of the circle is 5. The circle is centered at the origin 0, 0. So this is x. We don't know what x is. We have to find out. So remember the Pythagorean Theorem. So in a right triangle, A, B, and C, this has to be a 90 degree. So we have a squared plus b squared equals to c squared. That is the relationship between a, b, and c in a right triangle only. Again, right triangle only. If this angle is not 90 degree, then we have some other formulas. We will cover that in the other lesson. So let's do this. X squared plus 3 squared equals to 5 squared. I see a perfect square in there, so that is 25 minus 9 equals to 16. So take the square root on both sides. X is equals to 4. So that one is equals to 4. How come I didn't take care of the plus or minus? Because we don't need to. In quadrant 1, x is positive, all right? At this point, x is 4, y is 3. In quadrant 1, they are both positive. So now, what is my cosine? So my cosine is, so cosine theta, CAH, right? So CA divided by H. So adjacent is 4, hypotenuse is 5. So now, let's do some highlight. So now, I have a sine, and I have a cosine. So we are ready to roll. So what's the first problem asking? The first problem is asking, in case you are still wondering, hey, where is the tangent? You can do a tangent really quick, but we don't need it. So the tangent that will be sine divided by cosine. So that is 3 over 5 divided by 4 over 5. That equals to 3 over 4. But since none of the subproblem is asking for a tangent, then we don't need a tangent. If you have a subproblem asking you for a tangent 2 theta or tangent half theta, then you need a tangent. So in part A, they ask you to do a sine of 2 theta. So sine of 2 theta, that is 2 times sine theta, cosine theta, and then you do the plug-in. So sine is 3 over 5, cosine is 4 over 5. So you have 24 divided by 25. Always box your final answer, because when you check your work, you know where to look for your final answer. When someone is grading your work, they know where to look for your final answer. If you don't do the boxing things, it is hard to look for your final answer in a in one page. So B, we have a cosine of 2 theta. So that is equals to cosine square theta minus sine square theta. Can we use the other two formulas? Absolutely. You will end up with the same answer. So you square that. Oh, by the way, speaking of this, we have to do this in red. Cosine square theta. What is the 2? The 2 is exponent. So that means you have cosine theta. Is not 6, is a theta. And then you square that. Okay, so that is how you do the 2. But if you have a cosine 2 theta, that is another story. This is a cosine. When I give you an angle measurement, you have to take 2 times the angle measurement. All right, the 2 in the upper right hand corner of cosine means you square the entire term. But if you have a 2 right next to a theta or x or alpha, then that means you have to double up the angle. All right. Be very careful. And then you have cosine square theta, so you square the cosine, so 4 over 5 square minus 3 over 5 square. This one, I will just give you the final answer, that equals to 27 divided by 25. And then C, you have a half angle, so we have sine of alpha divided by 2, that equals to, look at your formula, the one you just wrote down. So 1 minus cosine theta divided by 2. And then what Should I use a plus or a minus? The answer is we have to use a plus. Why? Because of the half theta is in quadrant 1, where x and y, they are both positive. So sine is y, right? Y is positive, so you use the positive. What if that is in quadrant 3 and 4? Then you use the negative, all right? And then we do the work. 1 minus 4 over 5 divided by 2. So that is the square root of 1/5 divided by 2. So that is the square root of 1 over 10. Let's review your algebra. So that is the square root of 1 divided by square root of 10. So that is 1 divided by square root of 10. Is this answer acceptable? In trigonometry, this answer is partially right. Is incomplete. It's not partially right because you will have to rationalize your answer because there is a radical in the denominator. So all you have to do is you multiply the top and bottom by square root of 10. Then what do you get? So you have root 10 divided by 10. So what is this step called? This step called is rationalize your answer. What is rationalize? This rationalize. So when people ask for a rationalize, that means they do not want to see a radical in denominator. So that is what rationalize is. All right, moving on to the next problem. So it's actually the last problem. So in D, we have cosine theta divided by 2 plus or minus. The answer is we are using a plus because the half theta is in quadrant 1 divided by 2. All right, so we plug in the cosine. So that is 1 plus 4 over 5 divided by 2. So we have 9 over 5 divided by 2. So we have the square root of 9 over 10. So that equals to the square root of 9 divided by square root of 10. Then this is a 3 over root 10. And then you have to multiply top and bottom by root 10 because you are not allowed to have a square root in the denominator. So that is 3 root 10 times root 10. You box your answer, then that's it. So that will be all for the first problem. The next problem, let's switch colors for that. So the next problem is in number 2, we have secant theta equals to 3. I don't want to work with secant because the double angle and half angle, they are sine, cosine, and tangent. I want to avoid secant. So secant is 1 divided by cosine. So that is equals to 3. And then you solve for cosine. So therefore, cosine theta is equals to 1/3, and this is greater than 0. So we know that x is positive, right? So don't forget, then the other given condition is sine theta greater than 0. So we have y greater than 0 and x greater than 0. What quadrant is this? So that means theta is in quadrant 1, and then x and y are both positive. All right. So what is quadrant 1? Quadrant 1, so give me the domain. So theta is between 0 and pi over 2, right? 0 degree and 90 degree. And then you divide each side by 2. 0 divided by 2, theta divided by 2. And this will be a half pi divided by 2. So you have 0, half theta. So this will be a pi over 8. Oh, divided by 2. I wrote divided by 4. So this will be divided by 4. So pi over 4 is 45 degree. Between 0 and 45 degree, the half theta is in quadrant 1, where both x and y are positive. So when you do the half angle, the plus or minus sign, you take the plus. So speaking of quadrant 1, I need my right triangle. So this is my right angle, this is my theta. So given, so we have cosine theta, CAH, right? CAH is equals to 1/3. So adjacent hypotenuse this is my y value. So 1 square plus y square equals to 3 square. So that is 9 minus 1 equals to 8. And then you take the square root of 8. What do you have? You have 2 root 2. So that is your y value. Alright, both x and y are positive. Okay, we have cosine. That is not enough, right? I still need a sine. So sine of theta, SOH. That is 1/3. And then let's drop the cosine right here. Cosine theta is also equals to 1/3. Oh, actually there is a mistake. So opposite. I just got my opposite, right? So it's 2 root 2 divided 2. Oh, come on. 2 root 2 divided by 3. 2 root 2 divided by 3 and then 1/3. You have to be very careful, because if the sine or the cosine is wrong, then the whole problem is wrong. The setup is wrong, the entire problem is wrong. So let's go ahead to do number A. So that is sine of 2 theta equals to 2 times sine theta cosine theta. And then you just plug in. And then times 1/3. So overall, you have 4 root 2 divided by 9. Oh, don't use decimal. Do not approximate this. All right? Do not approximate this. You have to provide the exact value. Approximation is not acceptable. It doesn't matter which class you're in, doesn't matter which textbook you are using. So part B, we have cosine of 2 theta. So that is equals to cosine square theta minus sine square theta. So cosine square, again, cosine square theta, that means you square the cosine theta. That is the square of 1/3, not 1/2, and then minus the square of 2 root 2 over 3. So that is equals to 1/9 minus 8/9, and then that equals to -7 divided by 9. So that is your B. And then your C, you have half angle. So that is 1 minus cosine theta divided by 2. And then what sign goes here? The answer is plus. Why? Because in quadrant 1, both x and y, or not because in quadrant 1, we have to go back to that reason. So because this half angle is in quadrant 1. Oh, it's in quadrant 1. So in quadrant 1, both x and y are positive. So that's why we keep the positive. If that is in quadrant 3, then when you do half angle of sine and cosine, then they are both negative then. Always check the quadrant. So that is a plus 1 minus cosine divided by 2. So that will be a square root of 2 over 3 divided by 2. That will be the square root of 2 divided by 2 divided by 6. So 2 divided by 6 is root 1/3. So that is root 1 divided by root 3. So you have 1 over root 3. And then what? And then you have to rationalize, right? So rationalize, you multiply the top and bottom by root 3. And then what is that equal to? That equals to root 3 divided by 3. That is your answer. So this yellow step is called rationalize. For answer. And then part D. And then part D, you have cosine theta divided by 2. Again, that is in quadrant 1. So we take the plus. This is 1 plus cosine theta divided by 2. So that is 1 plus 1/3 divided by 2. Then you have 4 over 3 divided by 2. Then you have 4 over 6. So this will be 2/3. And then you have root 2. Let's don't squeeze everything right here. Need more some space. So root 2 divided by root 3. Nothing can be simplified, but I have to do rationalize. So root 3 and root 3. And then what do we have? We have root 2 times root 3 is root 6. The bottom is 3. So this is finished. Moving on to number 3. Number 3, the given is tangent theta equals to -3 and sine of theta is less than 0. So that means y is less than 0. All right, so we have tangent theta equals to sine theta divided by cosine theta that equals to -3, or you can write -3 divided by 1, right? We have to be very careful right here. So we have a sine is negative, cosine is positive, so that is equals to negative, right? So we have positive x and then negative y. What quadrant is that? That is in quadrant 4. Because in quadrant 4, x is greater than 0 and then y is less than 0. Positive x and negative y. Now, is that means, listen, this is very important. Is that means sine is -3, cosine is 1? The answer is no. To get the sine and the cosine, you have to use a right triangle trigonometry, because a number divided by a number equals to -3. There are so many possibilities, right? A number divided by another number equals to -3. There are so many possibilities. It is not always -3 and 1. So at this point, we cannot determine sine and cosine yet. We need a right triangle. All right, let's do a right triangle in quadrant 4. So in quadrant 4, that is my right triangle. So that is theta. So we have -3. This is a 1. This is my radius. Radius is always positive. Okay, so we have why is this why the -3 and 1 right there? Because we have tangent equals to opposites divided by adjacent, TOA, right? So -3 divided by 1, and then we have to find the r. So -3 square plus 1 square equals to r square. So 9 plus 1, r square is equals to 10. So r is equals to root 10. So this is root 10. And then we use the right triangle trigonometry. What is this? That is called SOHCAHTOA. CAH. And then sine of theta is opposite divided by hypotenuse. So that is equals to -3 divided by root 10. So that is, you rationalize, right? So you have to multiply the top and bottom by root 10. So sine of theta is equals to -3 times root 10 divided by 10. We need that. Cosine theta is CAH. That is equal to 1 divided by root 10. Rationalize. So we have root 10 divided by 10. So let's highlight this a little bit. We need this to do the work. Okay, we need them. And then, do we need a tangent? The answer is no, because I did not ask for half angle for the tangent. Okay, moving on to the first part. So in part A, I have sine of 2 theta. So that is 2 sine theta cosine theta. So that is 2 times -3 root 10 divided by 10 times root 10 divided by 10. So that is equals to -6 divided by 10. That is -3 over 5. And then in part B, we have cosine of 2 theta. So that one, there are 3 formulas for the double angle of cosine, right? Use either one of them. I will pick the first one, cosine square minus sine square. And then again, once again, cosine square is the square of cosine, right? And then the 2 theta is 2 times an angle. This one, the 2 is not going to multiply the angle. Plug in negative 3 root 10 divided by 10. Plug in, so what do we have? This one we have 10 divided by 100 plus, oh not plus, minus 90 divided by 100, so that is negative 80 divided by 100, so you have negative 4/5. That should be. And then what about the next one, the half angle? So the half angle, let's do some analysis. So this is theta is in quadrant 4. So in quadrant 4, the theta is between 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi, right? 270 degree and 360 degree. And then you divide each side by 2. So we have 3 pi over 2 divided by 2 is 3 pi over 4. And then theta and then pi. Look at your unit circle, 3 pi over 4 and pi. Where is that? That is in quadrant 2. So in quadrant 2, we have negative x and positive y. So we have sine of theta divided by 2. Tell me, what sign? Plus or minus? Y is plus, so big plus. 1 minus cosine theta divided by 2. The plus is carried over there. And then we have 1 minus root 10 divided by 10. You have to be sharp with your common denominator, right? So 10 minus root 10 divided by 10, the whole thing divided by 2, and then 10 times 2, you have a 20. So you have a 10 minus root 10 divided by 20. I know you want to leave the answer like that, but you have to simplify all the way to the end. So the root 20, so that is 4 times 5, right? So that is a 2 root 5. So we have root 10 minus this divided by 2 root 5. If you multiply the top and bottom by 5, that gives you this. Multiply the top and bottom by root 5. What do you get? So that gives you, this is part C by the way, that gives you 10 in the denominator. The 5 you can just distribute, just like this. 5 times 10 minus root 10, or you leave it right there if you don't want to distribute. So that is your final answer. And then you have a D, right? You have a cosine. So we have a cosine theta divided by 2. So cosine theta divided by 2. Cosine theta divided by 2, we take the plus or minus? We take the minus, right? So the minus, we have 1 plus cosine. So cosine theta divided by 2. And then cosine theta, you have 1 plus root 10 divided by 10, and then you have the whole thing over 2. So looks like the only difference between the top and bottom is really the minus sign, right? So this is a minus, this is a plus. So for the minus, you have that. For the plus, then what do you have right there? So you have, I think the only difference is the minus. Right, so the only difference is the minus. We don't have any negative 1, so this will be just 5 and then 10 plus root 10 divided by 2, because they follows the same math, right? So this will be a plus, this will be a plus, this will be a plus, everything else is the same. So this is your final answer. Alright, so that is the basic introduction. So in the next video, I will show you more examples of using the half angle and the double angle formula. All right, I see you all in the next lesson.